This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Atom Audio, Isotope, Native Instruments, Lewitt, and Grace Design. You're hearing my voice right now on the Lewitt Pure Tube microphone through the Grace Design M201 Mark II mic pre mixed through Isotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar, all on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show, and there's some great deals waiting for you there. Now get ready to rock.
As you train your hearing, you start to be able to hear more and more things at once, simultaneously, and it's not conflicting with what you're doing. Gong ging ging, gong 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 gong ging ging. Yeah, those are the two parts together.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Hey, Rockstar, come on over here. I've got a secret to tell you. Want to know how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars? Well, my secret is using Isotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar to make this podcast sound great. Right now, you are hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off over at isotope.com. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Hey Rockstars, it's your host, Lid Shaw. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is John Arrucci, an acclaimed master artist in classical, jazz, North Indian, Afro-Cuban, Afro-Brazilian music and other indigenous traditions, and someone I first met when he moved to Nashville to build his studio. Actually, I think we met at AES in New York before that, but he came over to my studio and we got to hang out. Having composed, performed, and instructed for over 40 years, John has studied on 3 continents and received numerous honors. His work as drummer and percussionist is featured on scores for feature films, television, commercial spots, and recordings including on Sony, Polygram, Mercury, Chesky, Koch Jazz, Chiaroscuro, Rykodisc, and other labels. He's performed and/or recorded with Michael Brecker, John Patittucci, Mariah Carey, David Byrne, Philip Glass Ensemble, and for the Dalai Lama, Bishop Desmond Tutu, and many other dignitaries, and has performed at notable venues such as Carnegie Hall, Geffen Hall, Jazz at Lincoln Center, Town Hall, Merkin Hall, and United Nations. So a very impressive list of accomplishments. His percussion can be found on programs including Patriot, Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Oprah Winfrey, and Rosie O'Donnell. As a composer, John has received numerous commissions, grants, and awards from members of the New York Philharmonic, the Manhattan Marimba Quartet, the Mann College of Music, and many others. His acclaimed 2011 release, Metaphors, which we might talk about here on this interview, features 9 of his compositions and performances on drum set, vibes, marimba, and percussion. John's taught as well for over 20 years at Princeton University, the City University of New York, and many other prominent institutions, including Eastman School of Music, where he graduated with distinction. The Smithsonian Institution awarded him a postdoctoral level research fellowship to study tabla in Benares. Did I pronounce that right?
Benares, yeah.
Benares, India, with Pandit Sharda Sahai. He has also studied music in Brazil and Shekere and Agbe with the renowned Chief James Hawthorne Bay, and conga and Afro-Cuban drumming with Frank Malabe, and tabla with Robert Becker. Hopefully I pronounced some of those names properly. Basically, a really an amazing and exotic collection of experiences in music. He's basically done a tremendous amount of music, if that wasn't clear already, and finally landed here in Nashville, Tennessee, making himself available for in-studio and remote recording, live performances, touring, commissions, and master classes, one of which I recently attended at the American Federation of Musicians. That's where it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. To learn samba drumming, which I was just really blown away with that. John is masterful at just leading a room and teaching everybody. He taught half of the audience how to play one part and the other half how to play another part. Next thing you knew, we were all playing as a big group ensemble, and it sounded, to my ear, my new ear to this music, it really sounded pretty amazing. So please welcome John Arrucci to Recording Studio Rockstars. John, are you ready to rock, my friend?
Yes. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm inspired.
Glad to have you here, dude. And thank you for your patience while I set everything up in your studio. Right now, we are in Columbia, Tennessee, in your home recording studio, where you have an incredible collection of drum sets, percussion instruments, beautiful marimba, and other things set up. Do you have a name for your studio? Yeah.
It's Sunflower Studios.
Sunflower Studios, right on. We also have a Sunflower Cafe in Nashville, too.
We had, the first summer we were here, we had about 300 sunflowers in the backyard we planted, and we do have them every year. I'm not sure if we had 300 this year, but that was the inspiration.
Right on.
Sunflower Studios.
Right on. Well, this is a beautiful space. Some of the details here, maybe just tell us a bit about your studio, and then I'd like to hear more of your background in music.
Well, when we came here 3 years ago today, was when we arrived in Nashville, we were looking for a place to live. We'd left New York in the middle of COVID, not because of COVID. We had already planned to sell our house, but wound up selling our house and just moved here with a couple of truckloads of things, no place to live, no real plan necessarily, no gigs promised. And when we were looking for a place, we were looking for a basement. I had good experience in New York with having a studio in the basement. From the perspective of isolation, especially for neighbors, you know, you're underground, and that solves a lot of the problems.
And you're
right
playing
away.
Drums and percussion.
Yeah, I'm playing loud instruments, and so it was difficult in the Nashville area to find a house with a basement. Is a bit of a challenge, and we wound up finding one here. And my wife saw the space already. I mean, she has a good eye for seeing the potential in a space, and I wasn't really sure, but we gutted this space down here and basically started from scratch. There were a lot of dropped ceilings, and we wanted some headroom in the studio. So I think the high points here about 9 feet.
It's kind of got a dog leg shape to it.
Yes.
Sort of a shotgun dog leg, if that's such a thing.
Yeah, outside the control room.
And then the control room. Now, was the control room space there, or was this sort of a L-shaped space, and then you just built the control room into that corner?
This part of the L was an actual extension of the garage. So we had put that wall up over there with those double doors. And then there was a room there, not very well finished, and an office there. The office had a small door. You see, we put those sliding glass doors. We raised the ceiling. We put a lot of...
Now, how did you raise a basement ceiling?
Well, it was a dropped ceiling. So we got rid of the dropped aspect of it and reclaimed the part that was above. A lot of times when it comes to a basement, people just find it easier, maybe for the cost of heating and for other reasons, to just put a drop tile ceiling. So it was a little bit lower, not in this space in the garage, but in that space, it was lower than the lower part of that ceiling.
Right. So clever. I think I can see that you took the places where there was existing ductwork and you let it drop just in those specific areas, but then the rest of it you were able to raise
and
up.
also,
so you get more volume that way.
Yeah, and we also put some vibration mitigating material on the ductwork, because for those people in the audience that are listening, we did not have a forced air system in New York. We had baseboard heating, and forced air ductwork is really the enemy of having isolation in a studio. It basically acts as an intercom system. So the first thing we had to do was create a separate heating cooling system down here, which is our mini splits that are on the wall in the control room in here. The other part was to try to mitigate any sound that might emanate from the ductwork. So we had put some vibration mitigating adhesive that sort of peel and stick stuff on there. Also, we have what's it called? Safe and sound, or some kind of good insulation and wrapped insulation around the ductwork. Really try to make it as quiet as possible as far as the existing heating system that really is serving upstairs. It's not serving here at all.
Right.
So one of the big things was closing the vents that used to come down here, so that I would not hear sound from upstairs, and upstairs wouldn't hear sound from here.
Yeah, that's the thing about traditional AC vents, is they're basically like sound tubes that just connect rooms and spaces.
Even when we had our system serviced this year, I went out there with some of that same vibration mitigating material. And when the guy who was maintaining the system had it opened up, I had my head inside there putting the stuff up. So you just tap it. It's like ring, ring, ring. Then you put this stuff on. It's like really quiet.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. That's cool. Well, so it's a really nice space. And then you also, if it wasn't for the treatment in here, it'd be a very echoey box, right? So you cleverly found ways to put all sort of sound treatment panels, very cool looking things that doesn't look like a typical studio. It looks much more like honestly, it kind of reminds me like if I went to the Children's Museum and it was very playful, it's like, because some of it looks like the discs sort of look like planets hanging up. And then you've got these cool half semi-sphere diffusers up on the walls, right?
Yeah, and even with the semi-spheres on the walls, for me, it's important, like the space is actually, for me, an extension of the instruments, and it's an extension of me, and it's an extension of my compositions, of my creativity. So even with the spherical things, half-sphere things that seem to be starting below this mini-split system, if you look to your left, there's a mini-split. See those little guys there?
Yeah, the little half-sphere.
And then they kind of go up the ceiling, and they go all the way along the ceiling over there. So the motif was, in my mind, that those things were condensation, and then they evaporated up and to hug the ceiling, and then they dissipate down near the marimba over there.
Clever.
Whenever I did anything in the studio, I wanted it to make sense compositionally, motivically, so that when I come into this space, if I'm coming to compose or I'm coming to play, the composition is already in progress and the play is already present.
Nice.
The room itself has play to it, like you said.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we wanted to create. Now, there's a company, Unica Vev, where we got the majority of these. That's UNIKAVAEV. And it's a company originally from Denmark. I think their headquarters are probably in Connecticut now. They have a website, unicavev.com. And we got the majority of the things that are in here from them because they're effective acoustic treatment, but also with a strong value in design. Like they have a lot of attention towards the aesthetic. And the aesthetic's important for me as a musician. I have a strong visual side. So when I come down here, I feel creative, because the space is kind of
cool.
conducive.
It's very fun. And then let's see some of the other sound treatment things. I think these are the Unica Vev items.
That's right.
You have the this what would you call it? You'd call it a spacer or like a
These are called Bauer. These are screens. They're
screens.
This particular thing is dealt by Unikovev, but it's actually called the Bauer screen. It's made by a separate company. I would say, with the exception of the Bauer screens, which I have 6 here in the studio, everything else is Unikovev. This thing is called Arbor Bass. That's above the drums and then above the control room space.
And the screen is very clever. It's as if it was a gobo, but it's not really trying to block a lot of sound. It's more like it's just, it's got soft felt-like fabric and foam woven on a frame so that it's sort of a softer, probably softens the sound just a little bit around there and keeps it from
and I
splashing.
do surround, if I'm doing something and I find that space is a little live, I will surround what I'm doing, and it does enough. We weren't looking, as you could see, for a dead sound here.
Right.
We wanted to have some liveliness, but not too much. And that side over there where the marimban vibes is, I find is a little more lively. There's a bit more exposed flooring because I like for the marimba to sound a little bit more resonant. Whereas the drums, I try to tone those down a little bit. So I tend to record drums over on this side.
Yeah, right. Well, and so then there's the curvy, wavy panels too, which is, again, you've got some short
These
ones.
are called Scala panels. And then these on this wall here are called Kula. And I'm trying to remember the name. I'll have to remind you.
But it's cool what you did on the wall too, where the Scala panels, there's a little bit of gap between the panel and the wall, so you were able to put a light there, so the light kind of floods from behind the panel.
But I mean, there was also acoustic consideration. So for the company, they have certain prescriptions that if you're going to use this acoustic product should take up this percentage of the wall. Like I said, we weren't looking for something that was dead, but something that would flavor the sound enough. Like if it was just a wall, then sheetrock would be the spice that was added to my sound exclusively. And It's okay for it to add some sound, but I didn't want it to add all the sound. So each one of these items putting up is a spice, which we tried to be a bit discerning in terms of where we put it. Didn't want to plaster the walls with stuff, but just kind of, as you would use a spice, use it just enough to give the flavor you're looking for.
Well, and it also breaks up the space visually very nicely too.
Yeah.
There seems like the space actually feels much bigger in a way because there's so much depth created by all these, the breakup of panels and screens and stuff like that, which is very cool. Well, so let me back up a little bit and hear a little bit of your story, because you've done so many fascinating things, and I think that's going to be really fun to hear some of your travels and some of your adventures. Give us, as you feel like it, give us the brief arc of your interest in music and getting to this point now, or pick a few highlights. I know you've had some pretty amazing journeys along the way.
Okay, I'm going to try to be brief because, we only have so much time. But my older brother, who's about 3.5 years older than me, had an intense interest in music. He has an enormous record collection from pretty young. So I remember him letting me know that there was a group that was going to be playing on television on the Ed Sullivan Show when we were kids. And I remember him showing me the picture of these guys in the TV guide, and it was the Beatles.
Nice.
And, for him, maybe a little bit less for me, that was sort of the beginning, as it is for many musicians in the country that are around my age. So my brother started singing in a rock band, and he bought an amplifier and a microphone. And by the time I was in 6th grade, I met some other kids that wanted to play music, and my brother had an amp and a mic, so I just said, I'll be the singer. So I started singing in a rock band, but quickly found that I was more attracted to the drums. And so I started playing the drums in a rock band and eventually wound up taking private lessons with a teacher that was in town. Started working when I was very young to pay for lessons. And like caddying or doing construction in the summer to pay for if I worked all summer, that would pay easily for my lessons.
And where was this?
This was in White Plains, New York and Ossining, New York. I was born in Bronx, New York, and I was raised in the New York City area. White Plains is probably a half an hour from the city. Osting a little more.
But and what decade was this?
I was born in 58. So, I mean, my formative years would probably be like solidly the 60s and then maybe half the 70s. Yeah, right. I entered college. I graduated high school and entered college in 76.
You look so young too, man.
Hey, thank you.
We're probably going to have to ask you some questions about how to live long and eat and stay young too.
That's nice of you. Thank you.
I like to think that music is good for that too. It's good for staying young, but not for everybody. It depends on how you treat yourself the rest of the time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So my older brother was inspiration, and I started doing the drums in a band. And I remember there was a time in high school when I realized, it was a moment in time that I can recall, I just had a realization that what I was a musician. Like, that's what I was. So I was playing in the orchestra in school and the wind ensemble and so forth, started to be attracted to percussion. My first drum set teacher got me started on xylophone, and then we started playing. I started playing vibes. I bought a used vibraphone. So now in high school, I was playing in jazz groups and funk groups on drum set, but also on vibes. And that was a lot of fun. And when I realized that I wanted to do this professionally, and because I'd also been attracted to orchestral music, to classical music, if you will, I started studying when I was a senior in high school at Manhattan School of Music in the prep division, and had a great teacher, Jim Price, who really taught me a lot about sound production on instrument, about phrasing, some of the nuanced issues in being a musician that you don't always get in drumming lessons, because we were playing Bach on marimba, and we were playing, wonderful timpani music. And even on snare drum, which is a great instrument, the phrasing, the duration of notes, the direction of the music was something that he emphasized. So while I was with him, he was an Eastman graduate. I was attracted to Eastman because they had classical training and a really well-regarded jazz program. So I prepared and got accepted to Eastman, went there, graduated in 4 years, participated in the jazz ensemble and wind ensemble and orchestra for those 4 years. And while I was at Eastman, the first year I was there, a group from Toronto called Nexus Percussion Ensemble came to town. One of my former teachers, Bob Brecker, was a member, and I was attracted to the eclectic nature of what they were doing. They were playing African music. They were playing, Bob Becker's a wonderful tabla player, North Indian music. I mean, they'd all studied and could play music from Indonesia, gamelan, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So I started to develop a real strong interest while I was at Eastman in what they call today world music.
Right.
So I would go to the library, and when I was doing my preparation for exams in what was called survey, so we're doing a period of music. It's the classical romantic period. So you're listening to a bunch of different recordings. And back then in the exam, this is kind of like folkloric stuff, but it's true. In the exam, the teacher would drop the needle onto a record. And when you're sitting there as a student, you needed to identify what piece it was, who the composer was, what the movement was, and the significance of the piece in that period.
That's a trip. I had a teacher who would do that to us in grade school, but just to say, can you identify the instruments that you're hearing right now? Which was a good start.
Yeah, and so when I'd go to the library, because you're in a certain period, like the romantic period, all of a sudden you'd start to get a bit dull in terms of your hearing ability. So I would go into the Sibley Music Library, which I understand is really the second or third largest music library in the Western Hemisphere. And I would look for music that I could listen to clear the palate, clean the palate, so to speak. So you listen to romantic periods. So I'd grab something from Nigeria, or I'd grab Javanese gamelan, or I'd grab music from the Middle East, or, something that was entirely different, so that when I went back to the romantic period, it sounded fresh and my ears were being a bit more discerning at that point. And that was the beginning when I was listening to Ali Akbar Khan with Madhurpurus Misra on tabla, and I was hearing this music and I found it I felt ecstatic hearing this beautiful, gorgeous sounds that were unlike what I was doing at school.
Yeah.
And that gave me a sense of more of a global approach to music. I developed a love also. I started studying Afro-Cuban drumming at that time during the summers. I got a grant to study with Bob Brecker in Toronto every couple of weeks from Eastman. So I'm like simultaneously studying Afro-Cuban, North Indian while I'm at Eastman. And when I was there, I actually applied for a few grants. There were two real champions of me at Eastman. That was Ruth Watanabe, Dr. Ruth Watanabe, who was the head of the Sibley Library, found what I was doing fascinating. She'd see me in the library, the kind of music I was taking out. And she introduced me to Robert Freeman. Unfortunately, both of these individuals are deceased, but Robert Freeman was the director of Eastman at that time. And he invited me to his office. And I brought the tabla. He told me to bring them, and I played for him. And he actually just became a champion for me. He had encouraged me to apply for that grant for Smithsonian Institution, which was a postdoctoral grant. And I applied, and I won the grant. So I wound up going, after I left Eastman, I was home for maybe a little bit less than a year. And then I went to live in India.
So when you were at Eastman, that was undergrad, or that was undergrad and doctoral?
That was undergrad.
So are you saying that you were able to get a postdoctoral without the doctorate?
I'm saying that I won a postdoctoral research grant with a bachelor's. Actually,
amazing, right?
Yeah,
so
I applied for it before I even had the bachelor's degree.
That's amazing.
So that was cool. And it was heady because when I arrived in India, they greeted me at the airport, a guy to pick me up, with a placard that said Dr. Arrucci. I was 22. It was very funny, actually.
That sounds like we could start your funk band just on that name alone.
Dr. Arrucci, yeah.
Look, if you're like me, then you love having cool instruments in your studio, right? No matter what style of music you make, Native Instruments gives your studio all the instruments and sounds you need, from drums, loops, and beats to the coolest synthesizers, realistic strings, guitar amps, and futuristic synth pads. I love recording and tracking real bands in my studio, but then adding awesome overdubs from Contact, Massive X, Super 8, Battery, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid Keys, for example. Use the code ROCK10 now to get 10% off, or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples, all over at nativeinstruments.com. Well, that's an amazing backstory. And so let me interject a couple of questions before we keep going on that. What were some things you noticed right off the bat about the difference between some of these, Afro-Cuban beats and Indian appreciation of rhythm versus traditional Western classical? Did you start to come up with adjectives to describe the difference between those things?
Well, it's a great question, because I would say, especially with the Afro-Cuban, more so than the North Indian, but in Western music, especially in classical music, there's this connection to notation and to notational systems. And so I had a natural inclination to want to notate things that I was studying. And I found, especially with Afro-Cuban music from the African diaspora, let's say in general, that it was a good, okay reference in some manner, but could be misleading.
Yeah.
That there were some things that were really impossible to notate. And I remember my teacher at the time saying, you can't notate a feeling. The relationship to time falls in the cracks or inside the grid of what we see in Western classical music in terms of these subdivisions of eighth notes and quarter notes and 16th notes and triplets. And sometimes there'd be rhythms that you'd be playing. In order to capture the real feel of it, you had to discard any inclination towards notation.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we all experience in this computer world of making music too. When you try and, the computers have really introduced us to precise alignment of rhythms and beats and the way music goes together and quantization and things like that. And in a way, it certainly introduces a whole new a whole new form of music that can be appreciated, but at the same time, it's very easy to miss the point on a lot of the way music feels, the way with what you're describing, which is cool. And I remember you bringing that up in the Samba drumming class that you were teaching.
I don't quantize things here in the studio. When clients send me tracks to record, I don't edit. Like I record because it's important for me as a performer and as a player to keep my chops together in terms of locking in with the groove, et cetera. So I do a take. And if it's not a perfect take, I do another take. I mean, that may be a waste of time in some people's regard, but I want a full, natural, grooving performance. I don't want to go back and have to move every note to the left or to the right. Because, that's not why I studied these instruments all these years. Otherwise, I just program. But after studying all of these musics and coming back to classical music in a way, because I had a period of time where I was just full bore a folklorist and just studying various traditions and completely divorced from the Western European traditions. Coming back to the Western traditions and especially to some of the solo music, like, for example, of Bach. And when you hear the great performers of Bach, you realize that in that case as well, the notation is simply an approximation. There's all kinds of liberties that people take that make the music more human. It brings out the beauty of the music. So I'm kind of not really into mechanized music very much. I mean, I'm an open-minded guy. I'll listen to everything, but I naturally kind of have an aversion towards mechanized music.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because what you're describing about, the notation is a starting point. That applies to learning how to record in a recording studio too, and how to do mics. It's like, the things we learn are starting points for how we might do stuff, but it's really it's the interpretation where it really comes together.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. So share a story about going over to India, and studying there, if that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good place. Yes. So I go to India and I've not, I grew up in a lower middle class family, so I had not traveled at all. I mean, barely outside New York. And my first trip out of the area was to go live in India. I was poorly prepared for what I was going to encounter. I did stop on the way in Europe and spent a month traveling around Europe. I think it was a really good move because at least I got my feet wet as a traveler. Incidentally, when I was a kid, I started working for a neighbor of mine doing construction, and I was big for my age, so I could pass on that side when I was 13 for much older. I was driving a truck and working for him, and I was terrified about driving the truck for delivery to New Jersey, terrified about traveling somewhere by myself. So the remedy for that was to go travel to India and live by myself for, that's my approach to things. So I traveled through Europe. It was really cool. I arrive in India. My guru, my tabla teacher is not in India yet. So I just kind of, when I got there, it's India, 1981. The city where I lived, Benares, India, is the Hindus' holy city. It's on the Ganges River. It's an ancient city. And without trying to give it too many qualitative, descriptors, if India at that time is very underdeveloped, then Benares is really, really underdeveloped.
Yeah, and you're like 23 years old or something at this point.
Yeah, I think 22 or 23. So when I got there, I did suffer some culture shock.
Here you are, you're 23 years old, you've landed in India, and it's just
the first experience for me in the hotel, I arrive and it's probably nighttime. So they bring me to a hotel, and when I wake up, the first sensation I have is that I've landed on another planet because I hear birds outside the room I've never heard these sounds before.
Oh, yeah.
It was extremely exotic. But long story short, I struggled for the first couple of months with a tremendous amount of culture shock, with not only the poverty, but just the sounds and the smells and just the language. When I left India, I was speaking quite good Hindi, I think.
Really?
I was taking Hindi lessons with a teacher probably 2 or 3 times a week.
How long were you there?
I was there a year.
A year, wow.
Yeah. But I mean, after the first 6 months or so, I was speaking Hindi as often as I could.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of people who didn't speak English.
So it's one of the things that I've been fascinated with in world music. In my 20s, I was first introduced to hearing all kinds of music from around the world. And I'd find myself listening to, there was a guy who was going and making records in Indonesia. There were records coming out, what was it called? Like the Secret Museum of Mankind or History of Mankind or something was a series of records out of a label, Northeast label. And one of the records I remember listening to was Pygmies, tribes sort of singing together and everything. And discovering that the sound of the music they were making came directly from the sound of the insects and the animals that live there and stuff like that. And it was very striking. You think about mechanized music and it's like that often comes from the cities, where things are mechanized. So talk a little bit about, learning that relationship between the sound of a part of the world comes from the sound that was already there.
Yeah, that's true. And I taught a class called Traditions and Innovations, which was really about drawing the parallels between a lot of these different traditions and the things that they actually have in common. And one of the things is a cultural context, like it's serving a purpose in the community. There's a connection oftentimes to dance, to a celebration. There's a bunch of reasons. There's a cultural context. And that's something that has been somewhat lost in our country. Even in European tradition, there was cultural context for a lot of music that was happening. Nowadays, this whole notion of having performers that are on a stage and then an audience that comes to hear them, there's less of a clear separation in a lot of traditions between the performers are very much respected, but they're kind of walking amongst the people and kind of interacting with them. And many times in India, for example, the audience gets very much involved in the performances. They're counting the tal, they're counting the beat. And when there's a psalm, they reach this climax, the audience is knowing exactly what's going on. They're following the development of this motif, this variation, this palta. And when it is realized, they jump out of their seats. So the audience doesn't sit quietly. They're often yelling something. And that's even when there's an audience. Sometimes the audience are participating on some level.
I had heard that one of my mentors, Brad Jones, took a trip to India. He was teaching me in the first studio I was at, and that's the same thing he said. He said the audience knows these incredibly complex counts. They're like much higher. It's not 4/4. You know what I mean? And so they know when it comes back and starts again and reaches the one, everybody sort of really gets into it. So I've never experienced that. I'd love to see that.
Also, concerts go on. Like my teacher, who was a star in Benares, he would often go on last, but those concerts lasted 8, 10, 12 hours.
Wow.
But I couldn't take a chance and show up and miss his performance. So oftentimes I would get to the performance space at 7 or 8 p.m., but he wouldn't start playing until, let's say, 5 or something. Like the sun is coming up and now he's doing his performance and I'm so tired. I want to go to sleep, But
so how does it work? I mean, why is there a mismatch between what feels natural for you and what feels natural for them in that situation?
Well, because I'm not Indian. So I didn't grow up in that environment. And I suppose, I don't know what kind of preparations they made. Maybe those people, that were going to go to the concert napped during the day, or maybe they're just used to doing it. But, our mindset for going to see a concert is you go to a concert and it lasts 2 hours and then you leave. That's not the mindset in India in a classical concert. My teacher might play for 2 or 3 hours by himself, and he was one of many people performing. That's the thing, the value of going to some place like India or Brazil or any country to study the music is that you start to develop, you breathe the air that the people are breathing, you're eating the food, you're interacting. Hopefully you're speaking the language with them because the music is coming from all of those things.
Yeah, I think the verbal language must really inform the music as well.
It does. So that was a great experience. It kind of kicked my butt in a way because of, how difficult it was, but it was beautiful. And I think, anything that's really difficult winds up being beautiful if you can, hang in there.
Like this podcast, like me setting up the mics for this.
Well, I mean, I hope that I've not been too difficult.
No, you're not difficult, but me setting
ask
stuff
my
up
wife
sometimes.
if I'm
it's
difficult.
going to be amazing. Adam Audio's S-Series, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors featuring 5 models from the compact S2V all the way up to the powerful S5H. The range builds on Adam Audio's iconic heritage with new technology for improved acoustic performance. With new woofers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine, the S-Series ensures accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail, and a forward-looking digital connectivity. Backed by a 5-year guarantee, Adam Audio monitors embody durability and professional sound for your studio at adamaudio.com. So let me ask a question about the tabla. What our listeners, there may be some listeners to this show who are inspired to go study an instrument like the tabla or some of the other ones that you might bring up on this, and really get to know them. And then there are going to be lots of us who are inspired just enough to want to incorporate some of those sounds in our, indie rock recordings in the studio and stuff like that. What thoughts come to mind for you about ways that we can use some of these exotic instruments from around the world in recording stuff that's, just our college rock band kind of sound?
Or, call a percussionist that plays the instrument and send them the track and say you'd like to have some tabla and just experiment. Because I'm not playing classical North Indian music. People are not calling me to do that, but people do call me to put tabla down on a recording, and they know they want that sound, but they're not exactly sure what to ask for, and certainly not how to notate what they might ask for. So I would say, just there's percussionists that do play tabla today, and send them the track and say, I'd like you to add tabla, and you could say some descriptives. You could say, I would like it to be very spatial, or I'd like it to be busy. I'd like it to be virtuosic. I like to just add some color in this section and let them rip. I find, generally speaking, when you're dealing with stuff that you are not familiar with, like if I hired a pedal steel guitarist to come and do some stuff for me, it's an instrument I love, but did not have a lot of experience with in New York. I would say, what do you think? Yeah. And what could be added here, and what you think you could do? And you can learn in that process of, so you could speak a little bit more clearly in subsequent sessions where you're dealing with it. But that would be my suggestion as far as tabla is concerned, or any instrument. If someone says, I really like shakere, or I like birimbau, and I want to have you use that on this cut. Now, you may put it down, and in the end, they may say, no, that's not what I thought it was going to be. But it's very hard to try to dictate what people should do when it's outside the context. Like, I'd like you to add birimbau. It's a 1-string lute from Brazil, originally from Angola, we believe, that's used to accompany capoeira, a martial art dance form from Brazil. And it's used in that context. So if you're going to use it in another context, it's going to be a crapshoot. You're just going to have to see if it works. I have done some stuff for people where I use it, and I'm using it in a way that is kind of inferring something else, like an early string instrument in the Delta, like just kind of somebody just playing a string instrument and moving a piece of metal along it, sort of like a very early slide guitar.
Does the birimbau have a slider that goes across the string for different pitch?
You can do that, but that's sort of an extended technique. The original technique is there's a rock in your hand, and as you play the string with this stick in your hand, you move the rock in and out. So you get 2 different pitches essentially, But sometimes what I do is something that people would call like berimbau of the garbage can or something. It's like you put the berimbau upside down and you put your foot on it over some resonating chamber like a garbage can. And then you could take a piece of metal with your left hand and the stick. And as you hit, just move that metal, you can get pitches all up and down. You could play melodies all up and down the string.
That's fascinating. Well, I remember when we did the Samba class, you talked about the histories of the music and the sound and the instruments coming together. So feel free to keep talking about that stuff as you think of it. Let's see, where were we? We kind of went to India. When you came back from India, is there more you want to talk about your experience?
Well, I mean, there's plenty I could talk about India, but I want to let you know that I'd won another grant when I was in India. I got the notice that I'd won another grant I applied for to go live in Ile-Ife, Nigeria, to study the music of the Yoruba.
They're like, we can't give this kid enough grants. Let's give him some more.
Yeah, let's give him some more grants. So now that was really good news, but it was a bit frightening because I would have had to go straight from India to Nigeria. And, I loved being in India. It was a really interesting experience, but I needed a break and I wasn't even sure. I would do it. I would definitely do it because I won the grant. But like going from India to Nigeria felt a little bit like frying pan into the fire.
Can I just go home for a minute? Can I go have some mom's cooking?
Anyway, I got a message. And look, I love Nigerian music and I still would love to go to Nigeria to study what I wanted to study. I got a note while I was living in India from maybe from the university or from the Nigerian government, but it said that the course program that I wanted to do of studying Yoruba music there at the University of Ile-Ife was no longer available. So then the organization that had given me the grant, which was the Rotary Foundation, they sent me a note saying, well, first of all, thank God, I'm not going to go right from India to Nigeria, although Nigeria is a beautiful place. The Rotary Foundation sent me a note saying, because the university had declined to have me, I could now choose any country in the world to go to. And they
with this next grant.
They would pay for everything.
Wow.
So Cuba was always my first choice, but Cuba is not a place that the Rotary has a presence and so forth. And so I chose Brazil and Salvador Bahia, Brazil, because there's a strong Yoruba culture in Brazil. In Salvador is the original slave port. There's a tremendous African presence there in terms of culture and music and even language. I studied Yoruba while I was in Brazil.
What is Yoruba? Can you spell that for us?
Yeah, it's Yoruba.
And what is Yoruba?
The Yoruba is a nation. It's a people from Nigeria. It's a people group, but it's also the language they speak. And so when you study the music of the Yoruba, you're talking about the bata drums, you're talking about the agbe, the shekere, those instruments come.
Can you describe those instruments since we don't have a visual to see?
Yeah, the shekere is an instrument that I learned with Chief Bey. Originally, a good friend of mine, James Cherry, who's deceased, had actually shown me how to make them. So you get a gourd, you can grow it, or you can get it from a variety of different locations. You cut the top off, you take all the seeds and pulp out like people do with a jack-o'-lantern, with a pumpkin, and then you do macrame work with beads on the outside. And the instrument, you can strike it on the bottom and it has a tone to it. You can shake it this way, which is back and forth. You can shake it forward. You can shake it backward. Chief Bey taught me it has a language. So you hit the tone, it's gong. When you go back and forth, shekere, forward, re, sha. So when you could speak the language, gong, gong, shekere, re, sha, gong, gong, shekere, shekere, sha, gong, 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 sha, gong, gong, shekere, shekere, re, sha, gong, 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 shekere, re.
That's great. That's beautiful. And there's I don't know if my internet's working well enough for me to see that. Let me see if it is. There's a video that we've included in the show notes, Rockstars, a YouTube playlist, as well as a audio playlist over to Spotify to hear John's records. But there's one video I think you're performing.
And James Cherry is playing conga.
It says JJA 720 M2T. I don't know what the title was, but it's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And you're dancing around with the shaker.
Oh, I'm having
it's
fun.
Like the coolest looking thing. And it made me think to just ask you about that. Like, I feel like you learned how to dance with learning how to play music.
No,
as well.
I wouldn't say I'm a great dancer per se, but like when you play the instrument has a dance to it.
Yeah.
And so when my teacher is teaching, Chief Bay was teaching me shakere, the instrument is a directional instrument because it's like a trumpet, right? It has a mouth. So because it's directional, there's a kind of a science, if you will, or an approach where when you're playing the instrument, you constantly change the direction so that people will be surrounded by the sound. It won't be coming at you from one direction. So because you're changing direction of the instrument, and it's not like it's making your body move, but because you're playing, your body's going to move as well.
It's fascinating too, because we now, like, the next generation of mixing are these immersive surround kind of approaches, and you're talking about the appropriate use of percussion instruments as sort of a surrounding experience sonically too.
Well, it's because these instruments in their cultural and let's say religious context have a purpose, and the purpose is better facilitated by a surround sound experience. That instrument is used in the religious tradition to initiate possession. It's not something that I do, or it's not my religion. But when you study an instrument, and especially when I was studying the instrument, you want to be respectful. I actually played ceremonies years ago because people liked the way I played the instrument. I reached a point where I realized that it's not my religion, it's not my belief system, it's not appropriate for me to do that particular thing. However, it's all part of the learning experience. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I'm not doing it now. But the instrument is used to facilitate something. So it's making things happen. And this is the power of music, is that the sound vibration, not to get too crazy into that thing, but certainly in India, they have ragas for specific times of day and specific things. And certainly amongst the music of the Yoruba people, there are things that they do, gestures, sounds, rhythms, etc., that have been constructed for a specific purpose to get a specific result. And so that's an interesting concept when you start to make music more than entertainment. Now it's facilitating a spiritual journey.
That's great. I am massively impressed with iZotope Ozone. I've been mastering a lot of my records recently, and Ozone makes it so easy for me to get a fantastic sound. The mastering assistant will help you get started by measuring your track and suggesting all the settings you need for a professional result based on the genre and EQ curve of your choice. You can even reference a specific song if you want, using simple yet sophisticated modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting. You simply adjust the settings to your own taste, and it sounds incredible. And the magic of master rebalance means you can reach into your mix at the mastering stage and manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums. My bandmates are pretty demanding of my mixes, but now when I send off the masters for approval and get comments back like, "Holy bleep, pristine, damn good mastering, crystal clear, you're a wizard, finally I love my singing, and the drums and bass sound huge," well then I know I'm doing something right. So check out the newest Ozone, RX, and all the other great apps at iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. what do songwriters, music producers, DJs, EDM, TV, and film composers all have in common with you and me? We all need incredibly cool sounds that instantly transport the music we are creating to the style that we want. This is why Native Instruments is your ultimate toolkit with a massive library of sounds for your studio. Whether you want to create hip-hop, indie pop, classic rock, meditation music, pumping dance floor beats, or full orchestral arrangements, Native Instruments' complete bundle offers you everything you need, from drums, loops, and beats to wild synths, ultra-realistic strings, and vintage electric bass, guitars, and keys. The list goes on and on. I personally love recording real bands in my studio and then adding cool drum samples, synths, and futuristic keys from Battery, Contact, Massive X, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid keys, for example. Plus, it's a great way to make your productions sound modern and unique. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off or get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples over at nativeinstruments.com. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is John Arrucci, joining us here we're actually in his studio, in Sunflower Studios in Columbia, Tennessee. Beautiful place on a beautiful day. John, are you ready to jam?
Yes, please.
All right, so let's jam ourselves from India over to Brazil.
Get to Brazil, really cool, great time. I was there for about a year and a half in 83, 84. Was playing, I was ostensibly at the university. I was at the university, but it was really just the institutional connection for me to be there. I was out on the street a lot. At that time, in terms of studying, traditional folkloric music of any sort, there wasn't really any school or even a pedagogical tradition. I mean, most people in Brazil that play probably been around it. When they were big enough to pick up an instrument, they knew what to do.
You just take it for granted even.
Yeah, because, people grow up hearing this music, constantly, samba, et cetera, whatever is popular in that particular area. So I wound up doing some teaching at the university there as well. And
what part of Brazil are we in?
In Salvador Bahia, Brazil. It's the Northeast. So I had a great experience there. I speak Portuguese. I still speak Portuguese. I have as they say, I have a pretty good ability with learning languages. I mean, I think it's related to music.
Yeah.
It's also, I think, related to my tendency toward interconnectedness. Like, I will always, somehow my mind is always making an unconscious effort to connect things that may not seem like they should be connected. And what I learned and what I knew intuitively early on was, because Portuguese was a Latin-derived language, that I already had a tremendous amount of vocabulary, having been speaking English my whole life, to be able to speak. Once I made some observations about what makes a word that's English a Portuguese word.
Yeah. Had you studied any other languages when you were back in New York before going in?
I studied Italian in high school, and
you have Italian?
Yeah, but it was none of my family's. My father didn't speak Italian at all. His mother could speak probably. I never really heard her speak Italian, so it wasn't a familial thing. Me studying Italian had more to do with music, because Italian is the predominant language in music,
right? In classical,
accelerando and crescendo and all of that stuff. I just thought that knowing Italian was going to serve me as a musician. When I was preparing myself for conservatory and classical, life, I thought the more Italian I knew, the better. And,
right on. Well, so now when you're in Brazil, you started learning samba, which you were teaching us at the class. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what is samba? To the extent that it's fair to ask this question, can you kind of give us a little samba, a mini workshop right now?
Well, samba is a generic term in a way like rumba is a generic term. So there's a variety of strains if you will, of samba that are for particular regions and then for particular purposes. So it's generally it's a celebratory music, dance music, and initially was probably played on whatever was available, and it's the popular music of Brazil. The predominant. Brazil is known for samba, especially during Carnival that happens each year, the last weekend before Lent.
Yeah, and it's made up of sort of different rhythms, right? Different
rhythms and different instruments depending on what type of samba you're playing. So there's some sambas that are predominantly surdos, the large drums, with some repique and some caixa. And then there's others that have like a lot of pandeiro, the frame drum, that we didn't do in class because it's too it's not user friendly.
Right.
It's not something you just pick up and you start playing.
Yeah. What did we do in class? You had
you played tamborim, which is a small handheld drum with a stick, and you played agogo, and then people were shaking the ganza. There might have been one or two people doing that, and I was playing the surdo, which is over there.
Right. Okay.
And that's a class that I devised so that it would be very user friendly. So the emphasis there is not on technical ability, but really on listening. The focus is listening to each other and all relating to the surdo as the unifying principle. It's like whenever you're playing music with other people, you have to make an agreement about something. There has to be some agreement to start. And the agreement is that drum, the heartbeat of that drum, or the agreement in another music could be the clave. Mm-hmm. It could be a bell pattern. It could be a tempo, but there has to be some place you start that you agree upon. And if everybody, each individual person is in tune with that unifying principle, they'll in turn be together.
And I feel like somebody was asking the question about trying to count to know where the one was or something, and you just sort of said that's the wrong question. It's more of you feel it or something like that.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's bad to know where the one is, but counting is it's something that serves you well in certain traditions, and in others, it's maybe doesn't serve you. I was giving the example of when I've taught a group of music teachers, like for professional development day. So I go into a school to teach just music teachers. Now, these are people that you would believe have better than average reading ability as far as music's concerned. So I'd be teaching them, and then one of them would say to me, write it on the blackboard. And I'd say, okay, I mean, let's just do that for a second. And they couldn't play the syncopated rhythm when it was notated. After I erased it off the blackboard and we got back to singing the rhythm, they could all play the rhythm. So you could play a rhythm without reading it, but when you read it, you can't play it.
Well, that was the first thing you did when you were showing us the tambourine and the go-go parts, is you had us verbalize it. It was like a word that we would say first. Mm-hmm. And when I would play it, and then I'd start to forget what it was for a second, I'd pause and I'd remember how to say the word. I can't remember now. I should have written it down somewhere for myself, but I thought it was very interesting. And I've noticed that in the studio too. A lot of times trying to explain, what this ending is that we're all supposed to do as a band, or how to syncopate something, or how to do a drum fill, it's easier to use a word.
Or just go. I want and okay. Oh, I got it. I know it. Yeah,
pretty close.
So yeah, I mean that's really. So if someone like, hey, John, I didn't like what you did there as far as a fill. I'm thinking of something else. Sing what you're thinking. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that.
Well, so we'd call drum fills like blick 'em, black 'em, blick 'em, black 'em.
Could do that if you want.
Or bucket of beans.
There's a tradition in India. When I would be studying with my teacher, he'd walk around the courtyard and he would say, Gina, te, 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 Gina, te, te, Gina, Tina, Gina, te, 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 and then he'd say, go practice. We were hardly ever near the drums. In Western music, there's a tradition called solfeggio, where you're constantly learning music by singing it first. We look at music and you can just sing it without having heard it, by knowing the intervals and being able to attach the do, re, mi, etc. So that was good. And in Brazil, I did my thing. I had fun. It was exciting. I think it was a successful time. And then I went back to live in New York. I moved to Brooklyn, New York, started kicking around. I wasn't focused on what I wanted to do. So I kind of stumbled around. I wound up playing at Alvin Ailey, playing a lot of dance classes, and was just doing various kinds of gigs, but not with the same kind of intention, let's say, that I have now. I knew you wanted to talk about that later. We could talk about it. But I was just kind of like being led by the water, the river that would come by me.
Yeah.
And then one day I was home, and Princeton University called, and they said they'd gotten my name and they wanted me to give a lecture on Afro-Brazilian music for the faculty and students. And I went and did the lecture, about 3 hours long. And when it was over, they offered me a teaching job there. Not only teaching percussion, but I was teaching an orchestration course for the doctoral candidates in composition on how to write effectively for percussion. Not only Indian, Brazilian, African instruments, but also classical marimba, vibraphone, xylophone, snare drum, bass drum, it's timpani, whatever. And that wound up leading to 23 years teaching in the faculty at Princeton as percussion instructor, sometime lecturer either in the composition or musicology departments.
That's great. That's exciting. I don't know if I think I visited Princeton campus once.
Beautiful campus.
Back when I was a youngster. But I imagine that must have been a lot of fun and probably a great gig for you at that point.
It was really great as a freelance musician, as a stable thing that I could count on doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't every day. It was either a day or maybe 2 days. I'd stay overnight if it was 2 days. And I taught a lot of really talented people there. And the first year I was there, my studio was right beside Milton Babbitt's office. Milton Babbitt is a seminal figure in contemporary music, and he would stop in and we'd have conversations, and it was kind of lovely to interact with him. And so I did that and was playing. I started getting called to do recording work. So I was a percussionist who was doing TV commercials, movie soundtracks, sessions, and doing that in Princeton was good. But I did have an urge I started composing really much more strongly in about like 93.
Mm-hmm. Well, you watching you play vibes and all the other melodic instruments, like you clearly have like a very advanced understanding of music and musical theory, and in your jazz compositions as well, metaphors, for example, your record. It's fascinating to see that too, and to think about what it means to be on the vibes, for example, but for it to be your band and your compositions, and you're composing for these other instruments as well. And it's so easy to think of the piano as the central instrument for something, but really, you composed it. I don't know, what instrument did you compose your songs on? Do you compose on the piano or on the vibes?
Pretty exclusively. I mean, I'm thinking about changing up a little bit and starting to try to compose on vibes a bit more, because my compositions, like the focus is the piece itself. And a lot of times people have accused me, like when I'm playing drums and leading my group, that I didn't play enough drums. Like they came to hear me play drums, but it's the composition. Right. And I only play as much drums as serves the composition. They wanted to hear a lot of drums, but the piece is not asking for.
Right, you're like, guys, you missed the point. You were supposed to be listening to the melody,
the music,
the harmony,
well,
the music go together.
I mean, the drums are playing a part. Yeah. It's just not a dominant part. So I'll experiment with that. I'm kind of open to it. But one of the things as a percussionist that serves me is that this interconnectedness that I've always intuitively felt, I'm able to exercise it where I can go. I'm playing marimba, right? I'm playing, and it's like I feel like doing something else, and I come to the drums, and I bring the marimba with me to the drums, the aesthetic, the sound. And while I'm playing the drums, I'm not intentionally, but somehow subconsciously also trying to affect the marimba. And then I go to the congas and I bring the drum set and the marimba. And then I go to another instrument. And so these instruments they're all kind of akin to each other. Like they're very separate and very different. But when I play one, sometimes I like to imagine I'm doing the other.
That's cool. That's cool. And I love, I do think that having a studio becomes an introduction to all the instruments. So I started out on guitar, but once I started a studio, then I wanted to have more instruments around, and it gave me an excuse to start learning how to play the drums and start learning how to play bass. And it grows a real appreciation for how all the instruments fit together as a complete thing. But it's hard to imagine what exactly that complete thing should be before you've created it, So that must be a challenge in composition too. It's just like, well, what is the final sound of all these instruments going together? In the studio, it's easy to get into overdub land where you're just layering stuff, and then sometimes you just go too far and then you back off again.
Yeah. With Mike, there was a friend that visited from California recently, a really excellent pianist. And he came by here last week. He was in town. And I just asked him if he would sit at the piano and I could just put some of my music in front of him. And the way I like to hear my music when it's somebody at his level or a guitarist is just the pure music. Because those layer things are not something that I necessarily try to envision. What I try to envision is a strong musical piece that can inspire people to do things. And then if I have musicians, then I'm just curious to hear how they relate, how they respond to that thing that I've presented with them.
And some of your layers, for example, on Metaphors, you've got melodies, which might be the vibes playing the melody, but I think it was trumpet that was accompanying you on some of that too. Very mellow sounding trumpet.
Flugelhorn probably.
Or flugelhorn, that's probably what it was.
Maybe.
And it creates a whole new kind of a sound because it has the flugelhorn has the sustain of the note and the warm kind of
then I had alto flute on some of the tracks.
Yeah, and flute.
And I had cello on some. That was kind of after the fact, the piece was written. And then when I started to record the piece, I thought, I'd like to have this, or I'd like to, because when we tracked that particular recording, we did it at my studio in New York, which is the New York version of this. Mm-hmm. And we did a trio, piano, bass, and drums. And then I went back and put the vibes. I couldn't do vibes and drums at the same time. And then I might say...
Oh, so you're playing the drums and the vibes on your...
On Metaphors, okay, cool. Yeah. And any percussion you hear, marimba, congas. Then I brought in the flugelhorn player and Tony Cadlick, our trumpet flugelhorn, and told him what I wanted him to do, and then brought the cellist and the alto flute player, and then it was done. I mean, this studio here is not really designed or suitable for tracking.
For an ensemble.
Yeah, for tracking an ensemble. I mean, basically, I could get away with it, but it's mainly, I know we want to talk about the studio for a sec. It's a boutique studio really serving the idea of one-stop shopping for someone that wants to come here in person and sit in the control room and track drums and or percussion for their record or song, or that want to send me to do it remotely. And we do that.
Yeah.
I'll wake up and there'll be an email from a client. It could be someone I've never met or someone that I have worked with. John, I have a track. Can you do this? And can you get this to me by so-and-so? Yes, go ahead. So they send it to me via Dropbox or WeTransfer, whatever. They send me the WAV files. I load them up I use Digital Performer now. I used to run Pro Tools and Digital Performer. I have clients in LA. If they want me to do Pro Tools, they send it and I just get a 1-month subscription.
Right, and do it in Pro Tools.
Yeah, because I don't want to run, tons of programs. I've been using some form of Performer since '88, before it was Digital Performer. So I just really comfortable. I'm also comfortable with Pro Tools. So they'll send it. And a lot of times we don't have time today, but I could play you some tracks. People don't even tell me what they want. They just say, do your thing.
Yeah.
Someone send me a track and I sent back 13 tracks of percussion. And it just sounds really, really good. It doesn't sound like 13 tracks of percussion because some of the stuff is just like, you know what I mean? It's like you're just getting a thing. You're just getting some flavors. But the way it's layered, so clients will send me sometimes a track, John, add percussion, do your thing. I send them back my mix, which is how I envisioned this to work. And then the separate stems of all the tracks. And then no reverb, no EQ, nothing. The sounds are always excellent because I have excellent instruments, and then they could do what they want. And if they didn't, of the 13 tracks, there was one that they didn't want to use or whatever, they can pick and choose. But I always try to give a client more so that they have some choices.
Yeah, that's good thinking. And then giving them that ability to not use something if it somehow interferes with what their vision is.
Right.
Let's stick to the studio for a minute. You record drums, you record percussion, you record mallet instruments. What do you call the collection of xylophone, vibes, marimba?
I mean, people call it keyboard percussion.
Keyboard percussion.
Yeah. Sometimes they're called.
Seems unfair. It should have a cooler name.
Idiophones. I mean,
I like that one.
I mean, it's not really an idiophone because an idiophone is really more like a cowbell. It's something that is the sound source and the source of resonance and amplification. So everything but an idiophone has two parts to it. Like a guitar has the strings, that's what makes the sound, and then the body of the guitar is what makes it resonate.
Bierrenbau.
The Bierrenbau, right. The drum, the skin is what makes the sound, but the shell is what gives it the resonance. An idiophone, a cowbell, or a wood block, it's one piece. It is the source of the sound and the source of the amplification.
Well, I guess vibes is sort of, I forgot which one.
Well, sometimes they call it a metallophone.
Right, okay. Well, so when you're recording these keyboard percussion instruments, talk about some of the appropriate ways to set up microphones for those of us who might have a chance to do it. What are the different ways to do that, and what have you learned about what works well for that?
Well, let's say with the vibes, what is this pattern called? Is it?
Well, I guess it depends on which one you're showing. There's maybe that's ORTF, which is like,
yeah,
they're pointing away from each other, and the capsules are a little bit apart. So
no, they're right. I mean, they're right. They're from the same stand,
right,
and like this.
Yeah,
I usually use.
It's almost like the distance of your ears.
I usually use that on the vibes, and I usually use AKG. I think they're 461 EBs, but with the old capsule, they're really nice mics. I have a couple of 414s. I think I use those other mics more on the vibes, just like that. And it comes out, if you listen metaphors on vibes, I mean, that's a really great vibe sound.
Yeah, it is.
And that's it. I keep it simple here. I run a ULN8 metric halo. I'm kind of an endorser. And it's got 8 inputs. I mean, for my purposes, I rarely use more than 2 inputs for anything that I'm doing here for the tracks that I do. Sometimes I set up those 2 441 EBs and I do everything with them, either mono or stereo.
So the 461s, those are small diaphragm mics, I believe, right? And the 414s, of course, are a larger diaphragm. And it's interesting because, yeah, I agree. The small diaphragm mics, they naturally pick up the detail in an instrument and the attack because the diaphragm can move more quickly. So it makes sense that you might really appreciate those. Those probably have the detail of even a soft mallet hitting something, it probably picks up just the right amount of attack, whereas the 414 might sound a little different.
Yeah, it's all been intuitive and trial and error because, like I said, I'm not a real. I mean, I know you came to interview about the studio, and I do have a studio, and we do record here, and we record a lot. But I'm not the guy that studied acoustics or knows all of the. I mean, I do have a lot of nice condenser mics. I do not have any ribbon mics. I'd love to experiment with them. I have, some SM57, what do you call those?
Right. Oh, the Shure SM57.
Yeah, but
dynamic
mics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bunch of those as well. And I have a bunch of PZMs also. I think I have 4 or 5 of them. Yeah. So I
think you'd love ribbon mics. I think ribbon mics would be.
I think I'd like to mess with them, but for the time being, it's all good. There's just so much to learn, on instruments, about music, about the studio recording. It's just, I don't see how anybody can be bored ever in music. It's just, there's too much to learn and it engages you completely.
The S-Series by Adam Audio, crafted in Berlin, is a flagship line of reference monitors, blending advanced engineering and in-house design. With 5 models in various sizes and configurations, these monitors build on Adam Audio's iconic heritage while incorporating new technology for improved acoustic performance. The range includes the compact S2V with the 7-inch woofer, the 3-way S3H with twin 7-inch woofers, the vertical S3V with a single 9-inch woofer, and the powerful S5H and S5V main monitors featuring a 12-inch woofer and exceeding 131 dBSPL per pair. Despite differences in size and power, all these models provide highly analytical sound for professional audio applications. The S-Series includes new woofers, mid-range drivers, redesigned waveguides, and a DSP engine for crossover optimization. The result is accurate frequency response, consistent dispersion, enhanced detail in bass and mid frequencies with wider frequency ranges, and forward-looking digital connectivity, all in a durable design. The S-Series ensures longevity in your studio, backed with a 5-year guarantee at adamaudio.com. I sit in my studio now with all the equipment that's in there and instruments and stuff, but even just thinking about equipment, there's so much stuff, including the software that's in the computer, each of which requires its own masterclass to learn, that sometimes I look and I'm like, I don't have enough lifetime, to learn all of these at the level I'd love to. So you got to be a little selective. And it's funny because just sitting in your space, you've got all these different percussion instruments and drum sets and the vibes and the marimba.
Conga, bongo, djembe.
Yeah, each one of those is a
lifetime
masterclass and a lifetime to study.
Yeah, so I try to keep it simple as far as the technical stuff goes. Also because maybe I just don't have a natural interest or curiosity.
Well, people also don't call you because of your mic collection. They call you because of your musicianship.
Yeah, they don't call me for my engineering. I do have nice mics here, and I do get great sounds. Like when a client from LA sends me a TV show or a movie, and I send them back a track, and the engineer there marvels over the drum sound or the sound of the marimba or the vibes or the congas or anything, and they're like wanting to ask me what drums you're using, what mics you're using, I know I'm doing something right. Now, do I know exactly what it is I'm doing right? I know that they're happy, and that's all I ever care about. Like as far as what I do here in the studio and as a percussionist, when someone hires me to do something, my main objective is that person is very happy with what I do.
Yeah.
And I will do whatever it takes for them to be happy. And most of the time, they just ask me to do my thing, and I send them the tracks, and they say, John, what you did made the track come alive. And that's the best I could hear from them.
That's great. Well, so now what about when you're recording a drum kit? What are some of the ways you like to set up the mics for that?
Depends on the kind of music, and it depends on the kind of drums. I recently did something over here on the 1960s round badge Gretsch. It was a traditional jazz sound. Because of that, I tried to keep it simple, because a lot of those great recordings of jazz were done with only a few mics up. So I think I might have done that. It also depends on my playing brushes. If I'm just playing the drum set out, something I just did for someone, I had those same 2 mics overhead the drums, and that was it. No mic on the bass drum, no mic on the snare drum.
Really? Wow. Yeah.
The sound of the drums it just sounds perfectly even. If you know how to play the drums in that style, It's well balanced, and there's no way that things are going to go amiss. If you have the bass drum mic'd separately and the snare drum mic'd separately, someone might mess it up in the mix,
Well, and then now you have phase relationships between the mics above and the mic that's close on the kick or the snare.
I don't always do that,
but always add up.
If I'm playing this kit, the pop kit, I might have a mic, overheads, bass drum, snare drum, hi-hat, and all the toms. You know what I mean?
What kind of mic do you like to use for your hi-hat?
I think that I would tend to maybe use a C3000 because I have the overheads there. I've got a bunch of SM57s on the toms. I know they're not necessarily first choice for toms, but they do the trick. I have a D112 for the bass drum, which is a standard kind of AKG mic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've done stuff on the drum. I'm always amazed at how good this stuff sounds. I think it has to do with the instruments.
Yeah, it has
like
to do
if
with the
you,
player
I have,
too.
I mean, my congas were all custom made by like two of the most sought after. I mean, both deceased at this point, but great conga builders that are like just everybody loves their drums. The marimba is built by Doug DeMauro of Arkadelphia, Arkansas. He's the very best. I mean, all of these vintage drum kits. I don't have like some people have 30 snare drums, and that's cool. I think it's beautiful. I just have really great instruments, and so I think that's where it starts. Then the room is an extension of the instrument. So a bad room is going to make a good instrument sound bad. So we've tried to make the room sound good. If I don't like the way the instrument sounds over there, then I bring it over here. But we got to, the walls have to be complementing the sound.
Yeah, that's the thing to learn about doing studio stuff. There's a difference between what works best in a control room versus what works best in the space where the instrument is. And there probably are all sorts of fundamental things about the space for the instrument that are worth knowing as well. But in the end, we're creating something that's like a voice. It's like an expression of something. It's saying something. And so if you like the sound of what you're hearing in the space while you're doing it, then that's probably a pretty good sound for that instrument.
One of my students is doing a performance, and I was teaching him remotely via Zoom, and he was tuning the snare drum, and he was asking me about it. And I said, well, listen, I mean, we're working. You're in a bedroom right now. You're going to be playing this in a concert hall. So just be aware of whatever it is it sounds like here is not what it's going to sound like there. There's going to be big differences. That's why I'm a believer producers are very important. It's important when you're recording to have separate. My wife actually comes down and engineers a lot for me, and she's got a great ear, even as a producer. So she produced some of my record. It's important to have a separate set of ears, understanding that what it sounds like over there is different than what it sounds like over here. Even the marimba, the first time my former teacher, Jim Price, came to my house to see that marimba, when he played it in my old studio in New York, was the first time I really felt I heard that instrument, because it takes space for the sound to open up. When you're right on top of the instrument, you're hearing the early stages of the sound. But across the room, I was hearing something it just was so much grander. You'd think on top of the instrument it would sound bigger, but it needs some space.
Right. It needs the bass needs to, or the sound needs to bloom before it hits the mic.
Yeah. So it's nice to have a producer, if you can, somebody with a separate set of ears to give you some feedback. And also, like if I'm doing a performance somewhere, if I have someone I trust to hear out in the audience, because that's what it's important to me, what it sounds like on the receiving end.
Yeah.
Like I want it to sound good where I'm playing, but if it sounds good here and bad there, I'm not really suiting the purpose.
Well, I was thinking about that just recently because I was listening to, I think I was watching a demo of digital piano sound in, computer sampled one, and it was playing the sound, but the sound was like what you would experience in the audience of a piano on stage. So it's a very impressive sound. But my first thought was like, I was like, but wait a minute, if you're playing it, it's not going to sound like that when you're sitting at the piano. So it reminded me that there's a real difference between in what you're describing, that we should try and remember to be aware of that. Like there are some things that we might want to make it sound like we're sitting at the instrument while we perform it. But the moment we sit back to listen to it, we need to put ourselves in the audience and give ourselves that perspective on the sound too.
That's one of the problems or challenges when you start to deal with technology, because so much of it is so contrived. So one of the things I've been thinking about lately a lot is how what's going on in my head is another entirely different thing than what I actually play. And I think that's the case with all the musicians playing. And I think it's the case with the audience as well. So there's this separate world that's going on inside everybody's head. Because when I play, like if I'm playing a solo or even when I'm playing, there's something I'm playing with. Something I'm playing along with.
And it's in your head.
It's in my head, and the audience won't hear it. They're only going to hear my response to what I hear. And I like to think, I mean, as a listener, when I hear music, I'm often unconsciously, intuitively adding something in my head to what I'm hearing in a way that's participatory. So something also that no one will ever hear.
What would happen if that second voice inside the performer's head got together with the second voice inside the audience's head and they had a party? I don't know.
I think it could happen. I mean, I think when I hear music, improvisational music played at the highest level, when three players are seemingly they're playing the same composition, but they're all playing it along with the thing that's in their head. And it does kind of go together. Like it sounds good together, but you can just zero in on any one of them and it's complete. So I like the idea of when you come together as musicians, that each one of the musicians is coming with a complete thing, not a piece of a thing, so that what you wind up getting is greater than the sum of its parts.
Also talk about the communication that is not sound, but that makes music work. So I think there's something that happens when musicians play together, when you're having a conversation. There's like a mental conversation going on a whole nother level that doesn't get measured, but gets experienced, I think. In fact, I even remember somebody telling a story. I don't remember the name of the bass player, but it was a famous jazz bass player who had tinnitus and therefore wanted to be isolated from the band during a session. And when the engineer went out after they had finished the recording and put on his headphones, there was nothing in the headphones. So it was almost like it's almost like the performance was happening through the visual and through just this mental understanding of what the sound was, not even relying. I mean, that's a little bit of urban legend there too.
No, it is. I mean, it's an interesting question, one that I wouldn't propose to have the definitive answer to, but I do have an idea, which is that when you get together to play music with people, if they have an intention to meeting you in that place, then there's a good chance you'll meet in that place. And if they don't, there's a good chance you won't. So I like to think of that as love. Like if I'm playing music with people, ideally I love to feel that there's love. Like there's an interest in meeting, in joining somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you play and the magic thing happens, I think, when people are open to it. It's almost like you step into a space where you're open to what's going to happen. You're open to meeting people in that space that is kind of a gray area. And sometimes, you play and people are not willing to step into that space. And so you make the most music that you can.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other times when that the people are jumping in to that space. They want to experience what is spontaneous creativity on a communal level with you.
How much of that can happen when the musicians are stepping into the space, but the audience members or the extra people in the studio or hanging around aren't really going there? Do you find that as musicians you can still meet in that sort of mythical middle, even if everybody else who's in the room isn't quite joining you there? Or have you found that every single person being really, really tuned in makes the difference?
Well, when it comes to an audience, like you're talking about a large group of people.
Or maybe it's just 5 people in the studio and the engineers and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I think that like when I've played gigs before or like even recordings, people are coming from different situations, like who had a fight with their wife or husband before they got to the studio and so forth. So what I always try to do is when I go to play live or recording, I try to remember why I'm doing it, the love of it and the blessing to be able to play music, the blessing to have the ability and the inclination. And so I think that if I go with my best foot forward and I bring my A game, a lot of times, whether it's my intention or not, I will draw other people into that space. Sometimes you'd play, I don't want to say in a specific area, a specific, place, but you'd play and jaded people show up. Guys that do this day in and day out and they're not really fully there and so forth. But you're playing your A game, like you're just doing your best. And they get the message, like they get the memo.
Like you can uplift the other people in the room.
Yes, you should. That should be your intention, that if you bring your A game, because look, it's only two ways that it can go. You go and you're drawn down by the lowest denominator of what's going on, or you go and you draw everybody up. And I've always tried, not necessarily that it was conscious, but I got to do my best. I can't leave a gig and say I didn't do my best, because I won't be happy with myself. So I go and do my best. Could be the smallest little thing. It's Carnegie Hall or whatever to me, because I have to do my best.
There is an inherent gravity in every musical performance. Well, I'm mostly familiar with the studio session, so I'll refer to that. But in the studio, there is a gravity that would love to pull us down on that. There's some issue. There's somebody has a bit of doubt. Maybe it's the artist somebody who's really putting themselves on the line. Of course, maybe we're showing up for a session and we get to do the session and the day's over. But there's somebody who's putting their voice into the lyrics, and they might be nervous about it and they're uncertain, or the studio's a new experience. And if we let it, that gravity will pull the session down. So it's great to hear you talk about that too. Just that that role as an engineer, that role as a musician, to lift everybody back up, help everybody feel relaxed. Sometimes it's just having a good sense of humor in the studio. Sometimes it's just having a relaxed vibe. Sometimes it's.
I try to be light, but I'm not immune. Like, you can get into a situation where there might have been a disagreement about personnel, where, the producer wanted someone, but the artist wanted someone else. And the vibe will be such where, like, if you could feel that you're not really wanted, or that it wasn't really, and it could affect your playing, and it could go south. So I'm not being Pollyanna. I try to do my very best. But like in any situation, you get to a place and you're like not wanted, like, somebody didn't want you there. You go to a party and you feel like you're not wanted. It's like all the effort in the world may not be able to win over people. So you always hope, for the best. I would say that if that happened, that would be like a very, very rare kind of occasion. But that's why I think certainly I would tell artists that you have to be on the same page with your producer. Like, choose someone who you're in agreement with, because any disagreement in the studio between the artist and the producer is going to have a bad manifestation, especially if you're like a certain amount of time. I mean, if you got the sky's the limit, you could blow a day and then come back and, have 3 more weeks of recording if you got that kind of budget. But if you have one session where you can get stuff done, I think you need to start that with a vision that you're at least on the same page between the producer and artist.
Well, thinking about disagreements in the studio, disagreements are, I find that it's better to avoid that. It's better to just not even go there a lot of times, because there's always conflicting ideas. There's new ideas sparking from different people at different times. And from a lot of the interviews on the podcast, from a lot of my own experience too, it's very valuable to try and give room to each idea, and hopefully as a collective, or at least, if it's clear who everybody's deferring to in a situation, the correct answer will present itself if you give each idea a little bit of breathing room and try it out. There's an infinite number of ways to start a song, end a song, play a solo, sing a note. And it's like, how do you know what the right was unless you just try it?
I'm open to suggestions. Sometimes the problem may be that the producer doesn't want to give a suggestion. And in that particular case, like, you can go in with every intention to please, And if there's no communication in terms of what people want, just think of it as like your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your husband, whatever the case is. Like, tell me what you want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Give me a chance to make it right.
That doesn't always work, right?
No, well, it doesn't always work, right? But I mean, you can work it out. You got time. It's not a session. It's not a 2-hour, 3-hour session or a day long session. You can work it out with your wife or your husband or your boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever case is. But if you're on a session and there's a producer that is unwilling to express what they're looking for, it's like, no, but no yeses. It can be difficult. I mean, it could be difficult, yeah.
Well, and when I was thinking about that gravity analogy and, a young artist who's maybe feeling uncertain, lack of confidence or something, my point also is, as an engineer, as a producer, it's like if I don't take that moment to help uplift them a little bit, then the gravity pulls it down. So it's like it's not just that it's nice to have a positive attitude and uplift the session. It's like you gotta.
It's imperative.
It's imperative.
And if you're a producer, or even, I mean, even as a musician, let's say I'm not producing, I try to offer that it's a psychological thing. I mean, it's in my interest. I want people to be happy, to feel good, to be able to do their best performance. Very few people do their best performance when they're all like really angry with something.
Now, just for devil's advocate, what about music where that becomes an appropriate part of the musical expression? Do you find yourself ever doing music that's got an aggression to it?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
important to find
and then I get into the character. Especially when I used to do a lot of TV commercials in New York. If it was a commercial that was based on kodo drumming from Japan, it's a very martial kind of thing. I would take my shirt off. I put like a red thing around my head, and I'm just like, I get into that. There was, sometimes you have clients that speak to you in not riddles, but just like very interesting non-musical
more green.
Well, what happened is I did a session for a TV commercial for USPS, the United States Postal Service. So I finished doing percussion, and this really great trumpeter, well-known in New York, comes in, and he's going to go into the control. I'm like packing up my percussion stuff, and now he's the next guy. And the client, like somebody from the advertising agency, they're all in the room. And the producer, the trumpeter, turns to the producer and says, okay, I'm going in. Do you have any music in there? And he said, no, just think shipping. That's true. That's a true story.
That's great.
Just think shipping.
I was thinking, hopefully he's not a disgruntled trumpeter.
No, he was a good guy, and he probably rolled with the punches. I mean, stuff used to happen like that where people, like you said, green or some kind of thing. Sometimes someone would say, what would the cowbell sound like? And it's the client, the paying client, and it's like, you got to show them what it'll sound like. Well, I mean, it won't be good, but you cannot say no. Just, okay, you want to hear how this is what the cowbell would sound like. Nah, I don't like that. Okay, cool.
Right.
But not, you idiot, what do you think? And do that.
If you don't write it down on sheet music for me, I won't play it.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. Quote, absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session, close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the ultimate snare mixing trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. Yeah, no, I think about going in with a band myself recently and having a composition and learning how to have kind of a feel and a vision for it in my head, enough to communicate it, but also being willing to like give it a little bit of poetry too. So for example, I described and I was writing a piece that was based on a poem somebody else wrote. So I described, well, this is what I heard in the poem. And, it's like, it was this juxtaposition of it's summertime, but because of where this people lives on the edge of the water, it's the scariest time of all because you never know when your back's turned if the Vikings are going to come across and kill your whole family. It was an odd song to do. And so I just expressed some of that, and it was really great because the next thing you know, one of the guitar players, Carson, was playing. He's just got a mean distortion on his guitar, just crunchy. And then Kevin, he hears summer, and so he's busted out the 12-string and he's playing like, Beach Boys meets the Byrds or something. And I was like, this is brilliant. There's no way I could have thought of that ahead of time, but a little bit of communication and a whole lot of trust in the room and the people. And it was fun because it was also a band assembled where it's like never played before with these guys in this combination. So just learning to like throw myself into a situation like that and just trust everybody and all the people in there. It's a lot of fun.
It's programmatic. So you're just giving them a story, and then everybody gets to tell their story in their own, like have it inspired their performance.
Yeah.
So you're on the river and you could get attacked any moment. So now when you're playing, you have a certain level of angst.
Right.
And that's the energy you're looking for. And I think that's totally cool. I'm not saying that when you're playing, it needs to be pastoral and like meditative. I'm saying the environment in the studio amongst people, I find it's better if it's collegial, if it's pleasant and it's nice, and it's not, giving bad gestures to each other with your hands,
right?
Using certain fingers,
right? Unless that's exactly what was needed for the song.
If that's what you need for the tune, but now you're talking. I think you're heavy metal. That's probably.
I've been in sessions where a ride cymbal gets thrown across the room at the other band member.
I don't like that just based on the fact that the ride cymbal might get broken. I love ride cymbals. I don't mind the violent
the beheading.
Part. No, listen. I would probably be upset about the blood on the cymbal. No, I'm just kidding.
No, and I didn't prefer those sessions and didn't really want to do it again. But what was I going to ask you about? So when you do that and you trust everybody, then you still go in and listen back in the control room, and you might be noticing things. And so it is a challenge. Sometimes you still got more communicating to do. Sometimes you're doing the other musicians a favor when you communicate what you're hearing, but it becomes tricky because you want to sound like you're offering your perspective, but not being critical, of their playing. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be like, that sucks, man. Your part sucks.
No, I'm open to hearing what people say. And I think the first playback is crucial. I always enjoy hearing that first playback just to know how what I'm doing is being received, like where I'm feeling everything and how it mixes with all that's going on. So
one of the things I like to try and practice in the studio is make sure that the big numbers go up on the screen for Pro Tools on that first playback, and that I've handed, or my assistant has handed everybody a sheet of paper and a sharp pencil, and with a message, hey, if you hear something, just write the number down when it goes by, because otherwise you got to do 2 playbacks,
right?
And then they might not remember where they heard the thing, even.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, let's see. What do I want to ask you next? What did I not ask you? What's your favorite part about making music?
Oh, just the mystery of it, whether I'm composing or playing, I really don't know. I mean, there's the unknown part of it. One of my favorite things, which I know is kind of terrible for a lot of people, is there'll be times when I play with a singer-songwriter or an artist and I've never heard their music and I've not had a chance to rehearse. And so I go up on stage and I play with them. And when I hear the music, it's the first time I'm hearing it. And I find more often than not, there's something that takes over where I'm like exactly with them when they stop, when they do things, the gesture. It's like, it's magic, really.
It's like you're listening to that voice in their head.
Yeah. Or just allowing the intuition of it to take over. I kind of enjoy sometimes suspending my thinking completely as a musician, and just allowing all of the years of training and maybe no training to guide me on what I do.
I believe that our subconscious knows a lot more than our conscious most of the time. A recent experience for me are those nights where I go to bed and I just wake up in the middle of the night. I can't go back to sleep. And I'm like, what is it? And a lot of times I realize that my subconscious is aware of all these challenges in my life that are right around the corner that my conscious has been avoiding. But that's a little more negative example. But, in the studio, I do think there's a great deal of stuff going on. And I love also the experience of listening in between all the sounds and all the notes. And when you start to hear all the spaces, it's like studying art in art class when they teach you to paint the negative spaces, draw that, look at the stool and paint the empty bits instead of the stool. And there's a ton of that in music. But in order to do that, you really have to be able to listen well. So that becomes questions of like, is the ensemble playing together in the room? Do you have headphones on? Do you not have headphones on? Does your headphone mix suck? Is it terrible or is it good? Can you hear all that stuff? Speaking of playing with unexpected artists and also the poetry question, there were 2 credits on your in your YouTube playlist. One of them was something with Jack Kerouac, or it was somebody
I think that
reciting.
I think that was William Burroughs doing Jack Kerouac for a Kerouac CD.
Yeah.
And I put, I think that was with John Patittucci on bass and Gil Goldstein on accordion. And I played, I might be confusing it with the David Byrne track. No, I think that
was my next question, was tell us about the David Byrne track.
Well, in both of those cases, William Burroughs and David, I've met David Byrne, but he was not in the studio when I was in the studio. It was just, I think in both of those cases, those were percussion overdubs where I wasn't in the studio with any of the musicians. I used to run into Gil Goldstein all the time when I'd be leaving. He'd be coming into a studio where I'd put percussion down. And John Patittucci I have met, and he's lovely, and played live with him. But on both of those tracks, I was by myself. So I didn't see William Burroughs. He did a great job on that, though.
Do you sometimes feel like that's the plight of the percussionist in a studio setting, is that it gets...
A lot of times it's the afterthought. I understand. I mean, people, a lot of times they just want to put the rhythm section track down, and then they think, maybe percussion. But in those cases, both of those cases, the percussion was the only drumming. Neither one of those tracks were along with the drum track. So I'm not exactly sure how those pieces came together. But
rock stars, once again, go look at the YouTube video where John is playing Shekere. Did I pronounce that right?
Shekere,
yeah. On stage in the 80s. And it's amazing. And it'll be clear to you quickly that the percussion is not meant to be a last minute afterthought in music. It's so integral. That particular one too, just reminded me of, I used to have a copy of Herbie Hancock's Succotash, which I think was a big Shekere central part to that.
Bill Summers was a early inspiration for me as a percussionist. So the work he was doing with Herbie Hancock's group on Thrust and on Chameleon and others, and he was steeped in Afro-Cuban and other African diasporic musics, and I loved the Shekere, part of things inspired me to start studying Shekere and to play Shekere. So Bill Summers was a big influence, and he recently did something down with Bob Moses down in Nashville. Clifford Kaufman is doing a film on Bob Moses. I was happy to see Bill Summers. I'd love to meet him sometime because he certainly was one of those guys that I looked to early on when I started being interested in playing that kind of percussion that goes along with drum set,
Yeah, that's cool. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you about too was the, you had, let me see if I wrote those down. It was the opening to Killing Zoe and Green Chimneys. Those were two film sort of trailer things. Were those compositions you got to do for picture?
Killing Zoe, I can speak about. Green Chimneys, I don't remember very well. I know I did that. That was with Joel Goodman, who's out in LA, and he's an old friend. But Killing Zoe, the thing about that is like I played a Chinese opera gong in the whole beginning of that whole movie. The whole opening credits for that is you can hear me playing the Chinese opera, and it's kind of a cult, classic. I think Quentin Tarantino produced, Roger Avery directed film, and I was working for Tom and Andy, who they still doing movies. I see them putting up there. I think they're out in LA, but they had a place in New York. And I was the first call guy for them. And I just remember saying to them, how about this? And they loved it. They loved crazy things. I played ladders like in their loft, so it was like a Soho, studio. There was one track, I think it was for Arrington Road. It was like an industrial thing. I was playing like this metal ladder. The crazier I got, they loved when I was like, nutso, like just came up with crazy ideas. Or when I did that Kodo drumming thing, and I came out to talk to the client and I had no shirt on. It's like the client loves when you get into it,
Yeah. Well, and it also reminds me of the extensive possibility in percussion instruments when you begin to think about them in terms of dynamics. So you were showing me your steel pan drums here and talking about how quietly you play them to get the tones and everything. And I've noticed, like, if you really think about percussion as using the power of the microphone in the studio too, you can create these compositions where you're like, oh, this, a piece of paper hit very quietly up this close to my ear has a whole world of sounds in it. And you can get creative with your microphones and really turn them up loud and just have a lot of fun creating sounds like that. Like, people shouldn't think about percussion as automatically banging something,
No, especially because it's not only, so percussion is struck, shaken, or scraped. So those are the three principal ways that percussion is being played. I personally think I love that place of very quiet music, because I think there's a lot of different sound. There's such a thing as overstimulating an instrument where you kind of are killing the sound that you're making. So I love playing. There was one client of mine that hired me to do 3 records because he had heard, somebody told him that they heard me play the quietest snare drum roll they ever heard. Just based on that, he hired me and I did like 3 records with him.
That's great.
I wound up doing more than just rolling, but the thing that he liked was the dynamics, because he really would demand that his records tended to be direct to disc, like very high fidelity stuff, but direct to disc.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like you're in one space and there was like just 2 microphones. So the performance had to be acoustically what it had to be. I like that because I like playing softly. I like the challenge of it. And I like how music sounds when it's played soft. I'm not saying I can't play loud, but I don't like when music's too loud.
I'm thinking about the analogy that came into my mind was thinking about when twilight happens or when the sun goes down, all of a sudden you see all these stars in the skies and there's all that stuff. But when the sun comes out, it's so bright, you don't see any of the rest of it. And it's that way with sounds in the studio too. It's like, or just in performance in general. If you're playing things at a loud volume, there's a whole world of music that can happen there, but you're not going to hear any of the quiet stuff in there too.
Right. And that's why I like space also. When you're playing, I like when there's space in music, there's like silence in the spaces there. I don't like when things are too busy.
This might be an unfair question, but I'm going to go out on a limb here. Do you think you could teach us? Can we go out on a group samba beat verbally? You taught us. You taught us the two parts.
Yeah. So when I was teaching at Princeton and I was teaching my class for the doctoral students, one week I'd promised them we would do something fun. So as I was driving to Princeton, I thought of something that I called a samba sing-along. So it was on the drive there that I came up with these phonetics. It's not traditional stuff. It's just, here's the rhythm, and I think this is a good way to teach it. And I've been doing it now I've been doing that kind of class for 30 some odd years.
Wow.
So that was in 1987 or something. I'm driving to Princeton. And so the tambourine part, one of the tambourine parts goes, got, tiga, got, tiga, got, tiga, got, tiga, got, tiga, got, tiga. But that doesn't mean anything unless someone is giving a reference for where the pulse is. It's just a rhythm floating in space. So when I was playing the surdo, I was playing got, tiga, got, tiga, got, tiga, got, tiga, got, tiga, got, tiga. And then I did a call and you all answered like, zat, that, and we all stopped. Remember that?
Yeah. That's where it got a little bit more complex, is learning all the stops and everything.
Well, because now the challenge was for you to do something, but hear something else besides what you're doing, which is an art. When you're playing, you don't want to only hear what you're playing. You want to hear what everyone else is playing, so that you can make decisions on how you want to play with them. So it's good. I like to think of it as it's sort of peripheral hearing. It's like, instead of peripheral vision, it's like, as you train your hearing, you start to be able to hear more and more things at once, simultaneously, and it's not conflicting with what you're doing.
So got, tiga, that's the agogo?
No, that was the small drum, the tambourine.
That's the tambourine. Whoops, throwing my glasses off.
Yeah, don't throw your glasses around.
That's the tambourine part. And then what was the go-go part?
Gong ging ging, gong 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 gong ging ging. Yeah, those are the two parts together.
There it is. You heard it live right here on Recording Studio.
Yeah, I mean, it was, look, it's something I've done with kindergarten kids, and it's stuff that I've done with executives from a major place. The thing is that you don't have to have any prior musical experience, and I've seen everybody respond to it, which means that you can learn music this way very quickly just by singing a part.
I'm just a big kindergarten kid anyway.
Well, I thought of you that way, yes.
I appreciate it. This podcast is proud to present Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I master my own records using nothing but plugins. Plus, I take you into a world-class mastering studio, Sterling Sound, to meet with Ryan Smith and hear how he professionally mastered my record, Skadoosh, for release to streaming platforms. That's the music you hear on this podcast, Rockstars. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free mixing course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins and Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads for you to practice mixing and even upload to your website if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy to get started now. So let me ask you this question.
Yes,
this
sir.
is our closing question.
Yes, sir.
And I like to ask it of all our guests, but it's hypothetical. We can take the Wayback Machine and you go back in time and find young John, and you stop yourself on the 8th hole when you're caddying, and you say, listen, dude, I came back to give. I know you're way into the singing didn't work out, but you're way into the drums now. I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the recording studio yourself one day, what advice would you go back and give yourself if you could go back in time and do that?
Well, I'm a Christian believer, so certainly I would hope that I would get into that track sooner, because that's what has really that's what guides my life and what empowers me, literally. But if I was going to give some advice that was not a spiritual level, I would say two things. One is, if you're going to be in the music business, you need to know some business. So, I mean, I'm guilty of it, and I've met a lot of musicians over the years that love music and study music, and they're in the music business, but they don't know anything about business, and so they wind up suffering. The other part is that the personal interaction. Like I sequestered myself for many years because of all these instruments I play, practicing, and I do have a passion for practicing. By the way, I'm writing a book. It's in an editing process now called The Joy of Practice, or The Practice of Joy. And it's really about things I learned in the practice room that I have applied, that you can apply in every musical scenario, but also some extra musical scenarios.
That's great.
But the other thing is that personal relationships and developing relationships is very important, because people want to make music with people they like and people that they know. So what happens is that you may have 5 great drummers, but one of them is a good friend of yours that you talk to regularly and you hang out with and stuff, and he's going to get the call, And it's also more fun to step into a work environment where you are friendly with people, because that takes away any of that negative kind of stuff. So since I've been here, I really have, for the first time for me, gone out of my way to meet people. Like I met you. I came looking for you. I've met over 300, maybe 400 people.
Rockstars, John sent me so many invitations to connect or get lunch or get a coffee or talk or whatever after that first time we met. And I was guilty of being busy every time he sent something. And then all of a sudden that one day you was like Samba workshop. And I looked and I was like, I can totally do that. I'm going to this thing.
Yeah.
And it was just funny because I was in the back of the room and I think I asked you a question. You're like, hey, I remember you.
Yeah, I remember you. I follow up. And the reason is because this is a people business. I do like people. It's like I had to just going into a practice room and practicing and getting really good. Like the fantasy was what? That Miles Davis was going to knock on my door and say, hey, is that you, John? Hey, John. No, you have to meet people. You have to get out of the space. And I've made some really great friendships, you included, since I've gotten here and met. I mean, many people have told me that I know more musicians in town than they do, and they've been here 25 years because I've been intentional about it. And it's not Machiavellian. It's really just, after all, it's common sense. I'm new to this town. I was born and raised in New York, and I never went out of my way because it's like you take it for granted. I live here. I came here, I really knew like one person that was in the music business. And so I brought 3 numbers with me of people, called them, and through each one of them, I met 10 people who, through them, I met 10 people, some people through Facebook. I'm open to meeting everybody and anybody. And people have been very kind to me in this town. And it feels very aspirational here. It feels like the sky's the limit, like things are just beginning. Like it really even hasn't happened yet. Partially because I haven't really done my thing here. I've really just been kind of like doing things and I enjoy all of it. But I probably will shortly start to put my own music out, in addition to doing different kinds of gigs with different people. It's all good for me.
That's great. That's great. Well, and it's also a testament to the power of sometimes doing a personal reset, like where you moved to a new town and you said, all right, it's time to get it all together. And you have a really well put together website. You click on a thing and then it takes you right up to a YouTube video that's a reel that's demonstrating you playing the instrument in different contexts. So it's very thoughtful. And maybe that was something you had done before. Maybe this was just a really good opportunity to have all those things in place already as you moved to Nashville.
Before I moved here, a friend that lived here said to me, John, before you come here, you need to redo your website, and you need to put a bunch of different quotes and reels, because he said, I mean, this is what he said. He said, when you call people or you introduce yourself to someone in Nashville, the first thing they're going to do is go check you out. And it was really funny because I did what he said, and I redid my website. The website you see was created right before I came to here to live here 3 years ago today. And there were some people I reached out to, and they were like, when I finally met them, they behaved as if I knew them a long time because they went and checked me out. And I do the same thing. I mean, if I meet someone gives me the name of somebody, I'll go online and just put their name in. And if there's something, I'll just see. I want to know who they are. And, you know, so when I meet them also, I might say, gee, I saw your music, or I listened to your guitar playing or whatever. I really enjoyed it. So it's good, you know.
Yeah, no, I think it's great advice. And I think as older generations, sometimes we look at the world of social media and things like that, and it can be off-putting. But it's a good reminder that you can also think about the internet presence and the website or the YouTube or whatever as also just a simple, like, somebody just says, oh, I just met you, or I'm gonna meet you. What does this person sound like? And they go, and there's a little bit of something there because
well, I don't go on Facebook and argue with people about like current events. Yeah. But what I do is I will go on periodically. I'll look, see, you know, who's playing. If I see somebody that shows up a lot and is doing stuff with friends of mine, I might send them a friend request. And after they accept a friend request, then I might send them a note and say, hey, you know, I'm friends with so-and-so, and I've heard a lot about you. I'd love to have lunch or meet you for coffee. Invariably, I mean, I met a lot of people that way since I've been in town. I would say generally people are really open to that.
Yeah.
So that's been good. So I wouldn't say I use it, but Facebook is certainly a way. If you're someone that just has been here for 3 years, or you just arrived and you want to integrate, you just need to use every tool at your disposal. You know, go hear music, go on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I have like 2,600 connections on LinkedIn. I mean, that's more of a business kind of website, but that was something that I've cultivated over the years because it's just another tool. I'm not any social media maven.
No, and all the different platforms, they're sort of like what's a personal fit. Some people would be like, oh, I don't use any of those, but I use Instagram. And one of the takeaways I wanted to add was, because I love to meet people too, and I try and just always say yes to lunch meetings, coffee meetings, and everything, because meet people, but it is hard to hold on to the memory of like, who was that I met 2 years ago? And so sometimes I can beat myself up for that. But I think a good takeaway is to just say to all of us, to you rock stars, is that when you do meet a lot of people, the meetings that really are a good connection for you, they will just rise to the top. You will see them again. I mean, I came to your Samba clinic, you know, and we reconnected, and here we are doing a podcast interview. Well, I did remember you coming by the studio, so
I appreciate that, because that was my early. But I would say this, because you asked me, and this is not something I generally say because people could take it the wrong way, but I am intentional about it. I have a database in my computer which is called Nashville Contacts, which I started when I got here because I was brand new with not knowing anybody, and I have it color coded. I have a note about when I met. I'm sure in there you are there. The date that I met you here in town, information about you, and follow-ups, you know, so forth and so on. And periodically, I visit that list and I say, you know, I really wanted to follow up and meet that person again, or so forth. And you have to be intentional. If you're just like, okay, I'll just wait till someone crashes into me, it may not happen. Yeah. But if you're intentional about it, I mean, not everyone's going to respond positively, but some will. And it's a numbers game in a way. It's like you meet 300 people, and maybe there'll be a core of 10 people that you'll wind up making a lot of music with. Right. And
those are the 10 people you needed to meet. And that's a great analogy, people crashing into you. I feel like that happens. It's more likely to happen when you're young, when you're in school, when you're in college. And as you get out into the working world, it becomes less and less likely to happen unless you give yourself that intention to connect with people. So sometimes you can be left thinking, I mean, I have felt, wistful and reminiscent about my college bands. And sometimes I have to go like, Lidge, just, put some people together in the studio, make a record.
You don't have to be young. You just have to think young. So when you go out, I never ever, when I'm around, and some of the people I interact with are like in their 20s, like musicians that I wind up playing with, I'm not conscious. I mean, I could be, but I'm never conscious of the fact that, let's say, I could be their grandparent.
Right.
It's not how I carry myself. It's not how I think of myself. And so it's not how I behave. I cut up, I make jokes, I'm having a good time. They feel that kind of energy. And then we're just like peers. I'm not like walking in with a walker and just like, oh, nice to see you kids having fun. I'm like one of the guys. So, and I suspect that I will behave that way until my dying breath, because that's just how I feel. I'm not going to be defined by numbers. I hang out with people here that are in their 80s and they act. I recently went with a friend of mine. I hiked out to a very difficult place. Like we hiked into a very difficult environment. He's 79. He was killing it. I mean, he might as well. Look, I know people that are 40 that wouldn't even attempt to do what he did. And he was doing it like I did not have to wait on him.
Yeah.
So that's just a frame, just a frame of, what do you say? A state of mind, frame of mind.
But it's also daily rituals and just like, consistency, which are important things. And we don't have to open up a whole new topic, but, looking at you, I can see you're very, very young and healthy. Despite being 10 years my senior, and I'm trying to stay that way myself. And, my intention, I just put it bluntly, I'm like, I love making music with my friends and making records. So therefore I want to keep doing this for a really long time. So what do I have to do to keep myself, able to do that, especially considering that a life in a chair in front of a computer is the opposite of healthy.
Yeah. Well, I think, a lot of times people think about what they need to do. And I think that there's 3 layers. There's what you believe, and there's what you say, and there's what you do. So usually you do what you say, and usually you say what you believe. So you just have to believe the right things. Like that's where your attention is what do I believe? Today, I believe that I'm strong, I'm healthy, I'm going to have a great day. I'm going to try to, do positive things, to glorify God, to, show who I am and what what is my plan and purpose here, God's plan and purpose for my life. And that's the impetus. Then I'm going to try to say things that agree with that. And what I do is going to follow those things. Yeah. Mostly people do what they believe.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. Well, John, thank you so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us. What a pleasure to hang out with you, to hear your amazing stories. I mean, there's so much. I feel like any one of the little stories you started telling could take up a 2-hour episode to just talk about that topic. So maybe we'll have to do this again sometime. And Rockstars, you wouldn't believe the instruments in here. I'll try and attach the little video we shot when we got here into the show notes so you can see that too. You got to see this marimba in the corner. Unbelievable.
Thank you for having me. It was very generous and so great to reconnect with you. And hopefully we'll stay in closer touch now.
Let the Rockstars know how they can reach you and find you. What if they're ready to record with you and maybe they need to do it remotely or in person?
Yeah, either way, John Arrucci, that's ARRUCCI.com. There's a click there that you could send. My phone number's on the website as well. And that's probably instead of me saying there's an email connection there, a phone connection, just at johnarrucci.com.
But don't call right this second because we're in the middle of an interview, Rockstars. But
you can call. I'll get the message. We shut everything off. Thank you, Lish.
Thanks, dude. Thanks for listening, Rockstars. John, we'll see you around the studio, dude. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible: Lewitt, Grace Design, Adam Audio, Native Instruments, and Isotope. And remember, at isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes below, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio because they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.